I am Tom Murray. I'm the State and District Digital Learning Director at the Alliance for Excellent Education in Washington, D.C. Here to talk future ready with you guys and working through and transforming schools in a systemic plan for transformation. I will never start something like this in an audience of educators without starting saying thank you. I spent 14 years in a public school as a teacher, as a principal, as a tech director before going to D.C., and I can't stand up here without saying thank you for the work that you do for children every single day, for the kids that we all serve. I want to talk about this notion of future ready and why future ready and why do we need to transform things. You know, if you were to take a look today and you were to compare classrooms of 1915 with classrooms of 2015, a 100-year difference, we often don't see much difference in the way we teach, in the way we learn. We've got teacher-centric environments with kids facing forward, all students in desks and rows and teachers spewing the information and kids regurgitating it. But then when we take a look and we look at the headlines of 100 years ago versus the headlines today, and it's obvious just in the culture that we live how dramatically things have shifted. Look at the headlines from 1915. See the first wireless message being sent to a train. You can see those things up there. Thomas Edison inventing the telescribe. And then we take a look 100 years now, and we take a look in 2015. These come from Forbes. We've got smart machines, the ability for machines to learn. I mean, if that's not a little scary, I don't know what is. Or the 3D printing. You've all heard the stories of schools on one side of the country creating prosthetic limbs for somebody in need on the other side of the country and being able to do that. Or the computing everywhere. We talk about one-to-one quite often. You're probably 3-to-1. You've got your tablet, you've got your computer, you've got your phone. You're completely connected. But yet in 100 years, often so little has changed in so many of our schools, but so much has changed in many of our schools as well. When you look at the spaces, one of the things I ask you is, would you want to be a child in your own learning environment? I know when I taught 4th grade, I set the classroom up for me and my desires and my needs and what I was looking for. Never did I ask the kids what they were looking for. I look at the spaces behind me, that's outside of Chicago. If I'm a student, I want to go there. That to me is attractive, that is fun. What kind of space do you teach in? Or what kind of school spaces do you lead in? And when we take a look at other environments, are we creating learning environments where kids want to be? We often talk about 21st century learning. We give all these great tools, and then we put them in desks and rows and facing forward, and just because they're on a Google Doc, we think we're doing a great job. Man, are we misguided if that's our thought with that. I really think we're struggling what's called the cemetery effect nationwide. I live in Pennsylvania, and I was driving down a highway, and I looked at this cemetery, and I stopped for a moment, and I looked, and I said, you know what? That actually reminds me of the classroom that I set up. Because when I looked, all of the tombstones were equidistant. They were all facing in one direction. If you don't believe me, let's take a look. If we put tennis balls at the bottom, the whiteboard up front, the teacher desk, and the American flag, that resembles many classrooms across our nation. I've had the opportunity to be in schools all across our nation this year in many different states. And when I go, in high school in particular, I'm going to stereotype in that regard, quite often, that's the setup that we see. But is that the way that kids learn best? So out of curiosity, if you were in education for more than 21 years, can you put your hand up real quick? I know many people watching at home, same type of thing. First of all, thank you for your service and thank you for longevity there. But let's take a look 21 years ago. Where were we in education? Where were we nationwide 21 years ago?
T's.
Oh, that's
that little
right.
mark with the A and then the ring around it.
At?
See, that's what I said. Katie said she thought it was about.
Yeah. Oh.
But I'd never heard it.
Around
I'd never heard it said. I'd always
That's
seen the
right.
mark, but never heard
Yeah.
it said. And then it sounded stupid when I said it. Violence at NBC.
I heard something around big or about.
Up in the lunchroom the other
See,
week.
there it is. Violence at NBC. GE.com. I mean,
Well, Allison should know.
what
do you
is
say to that,
internet
Allison?
anyway?
21 years ago, that's it. But when we think about that time frame, I will also say there was a lot of great teaching and learning going on, a lot of higher order thinking. There were classrooms that were very effective. So just simply putting the devices into classroom doesn't change anything. It's not about the technology, it's about that higher quality learning. Thank you again for those of you that were teaching in that generation. And it's absolutely our job to create students and create environments that prepare kids for their future, not our past. You see, so many of us teach and lead the way we were taught. It's a very different generation of kids that we have here. Some recent statistics that came out from Intel, that 65% of today's primary school students will be in jobs and work in jobs that have not been invented yet. How are you preparing kids for that? 80% of the jobs over the next decade will require technology skills. Sometimes when we work, and sometimes when we're working with teachers, and I have the utmost respect for teachers, incredible people around of our nation, sometimes it's I'm not a computer type of person, so I can't use that. Would we go to a doctor that says, yeah, I can't do that, sorry. I haven't changed in 20 years because it's the way I've always performed this surgery? Of course not. So why is it okay to do that sometimes in our schools with children? When we take a look here, and we're thinking about this concept of future ready, and we think about 2015, and we go back to it, I'll be the first to say that there's amazing things going on, amazing campuses. The campus we're in here is incredibly beautiful. So much of things have changed, but yet so much has also stayed the same, a complete dichotomy of where we see our nation's schools. You know, we're talking about all of these things. Everywhere I go, all the different conferences, I hear one-to-one, and we're going one-to-one, and we're one-to-one Chromebooks, and we're one-to-one iPad. And quite often, that conversation is focused on the wrong one in the one-to-one. If we are focused on the device, your instruction will not improve. Results will not improve. If we're focused on student learning, they absolutely will be. As a former tech director, many times our technology rollouts, and we put them out, we buy all the stuff. We buy the iPads, we buy the Chromebooks, we put them in carts, we put them in hallways, we pass them out, and then we kind of put our hands back and say, oh, I hope they make a difference. Let's see. Let's take a look, and this is actually kind of what I would say reminds me of many rollouts here across our nation.
She says we gotta hold on to what we've got. It doesn't make a difference if we make it or not. We're halfway there. Living on a prayer.
Many times we're truly living on a prayer. We're putting all this stuff out there. How do we know it's going to make a difference? Study after study after study will show you ed tech in the hands of teachers in classes won't make much of a difference. Because a lot of times they're looking at the wrong thing. A study came out a couple weeks ago. More educational technology in our classrooms doesn't make much of a difference. That's what it said. Essentially, that's what headlines said across the nation. And that is true unless we focus on the learning side of it. As the digital learning director for the Alliance for the Nation and taking a look at that, I'll be the first to tell you technology absolutely can make a tremendous difference. But if it's just putting the stuff out there without much of a plan, if it's just putting the stuff out there without focusing on high quality teaching and learning, we're wasting a lot of money. So what happened was the U.S. Department of Education came down and they said, and Richard Collada and his team at the Department of Ed said, we need to do something about this. And they brought a number of superintendents together about 1.5 years ago. They formed what was called the Future Ready District Pledge. Take a look at what these pledges, what's going on in these pledges. We've got things like professional learning opportunities, high quality digital content, access to devices. And that's the pledge. And you can find that on the website, and I'll share that in a little bit. We created this coalition for Future Ready. And if you take a look at some of the organizations, by the way, Q is one of them, we represent all of these different groups, from our superintendents and AASA, to our parents and the National PTA, to most importantly our students and Student Voice, to other places like EdCamp and ISTE and COSIN and all these different organizations, bringing them together to say, let's work together to transform things for schools. Last November at the White House, President Obama kicked off Future Ready for us. If you take a look closely, our own Joe Sanfilippo's in that picture. If you don't see him, he is right there. And the entire time, he was actually just yelling, "Go Crickets," at the president. I'm not sure what that is, so you can go to his session right after this one as well. Over the course of the past year, we've almost had 2,000 school superintendents sign on to the pledge. I highlighted there California. We've had over 250 superintendents say, I believe in this stuff. We're going to transform this stuff, and we are going to do this stuff. Over the course of the past year, we've had 13 regional summits around the nation, 2 of them here in California. You can check out a lot of that informational stuff at futurereadyschools.org, all totally for free. So part of that is taking a look at what we're deeming the Future Ready framework. You see, when we talk about this digital learning stuff, it's not just buying the stuff and putting it out there. That's the easy part. All these other all these other pieces of things are most important. For instance, look at the curriculum side of things. Quite often we buy the Chromebooks, we buy the iPads and say, now that we have the devices, how do we change our curriculum? What a backwards approach that is. Now that we've got all these iPads, how do we transform our professional learning? What a backwards approach that is. So taking a look at the framework and all the different areas we have to consider when we implement, we're going to go through some of them. Let's talk about curriculum instruction assessment and how we transform that. On the right-hand side, you'll notice some of the key aspects that research shows works when it comes to kids and when it comes to teaching and learning. You'll see things there like deeper learning or personalized learning, applied or relevant learning. How do we get kids to those higher levels? We've known for years the simple regurgitation doesn't get us anywhere. So how do we do that also digitally? A good friend of mine, a guy named Bill Ferreter, a middle school teacher in the middle of the country, created the image on the right. And simply asking, it would be fascinating if you ask your colleagues or your staff, what is it that you want to do with technology? On one side, what you can see is what he deemed the wrong answers. I want to create a Prezi. I want to create a podcast. I want to create a PowerPoint. If that's what we're focused on the wrong stuff. Think about the big picture things he's got there on the right. I want to change attitudes. I want to change mindsets. Big picture things that we want kids to focus on. I love the way he broke that down. You've seen this image. You've seen it there for years. We've got Maslow's hierarchy of needs. No changes. But by the way, have you seen the updated version? Looks like that. How about the updated version? It kind of looks like that. Because if you're like me, your battery on your phone or your device hits 1% and your heart starts palpitating. I travel about once a week. I fly about once a week. And thank you, Fallon, for taking a look. That is me at the airport. If you look really closely, you see, there I am. I'm the guy that is tethered to the pole, sitting right there trying to get the juice stuck in, right? But yet often we design classrooms with the same number of outlets as we did 30 years ago, but yet we're going one-to-one in BYOD. So how are we taking a look at shifting things like that when it comes to power? By the way, let's talk about curriculum and instruction side of things. This image I found, this short video I actually saw on Facebook, it had nothing to do with education, but it reminded me of traditional instruction. Take a look.
Ma. 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 Ma.
We've even got the kid in the back saying, what's going on? Where are we, right? That regurgitation, if we can get goats to simply repeat and put back what we're doing, we've got to expect more from our kids. How about this? You ever sit in this classroom?
So today I'm going to share with you the most important, most significant, most profound lecture and the reasons that we do what we do.
And then we wonder sometimes why our kids don't want to sit in our classrooms. So how do we transform that traditional environment? But here's what happens, and here's the problem when we start talking digital, is we get all these tools, and you walk down a hallway, and these teachers are using these 5 tools, and across the hall, these teachers are using these 5 tools, and down the way, we're using these 6 tools, and I'm a teacher that's a little bit hesitant, not sure where to start, and I get overwhelmed. And sometimes in education, what do? We do so much stuff that we don't really do anything well. So what are the key focuses digitally for your environment, for the place that you teach? What are your focuses for digital curriculum? Because if we're all over the place and all across the map, we're not going to do much of it well at all. So we did a study with Dr. Lyndon Darling-Hammond out of Stanford, one of the top-known researchers in the country, and we spent about a year doing it. And what we did is we looked at every ed tech survey and study that's been out there. There's about 70 of them. What works? Because what I was saying before is simply handing out the devices and making a digital worksheet. You know, we've got that going on. People scan their worksheets. It's a PDF. They put it on the Chromebook, and they're like, we're doing digital learning. No, it's still a bad worksheet. So how do we transform that, and what actually works? And her study and what she looked at really came down to 3 things. Number 1, is it interactive? Is it interactive learning? Simply just having the worksheet online does not improve instruction. We see a lot of that going on. The second piece, it's to explore and to create, not the digital drill and kill. The digital drill and kill is not showing the results that some people think it may have. But when we're leveraging technology to allow kids to create and to explore and to design, that is what's transforming student learning. The other bit as well is the right blend of teachers and technology. There's places out there that'll put 100% on technology and say, we hardly need a teacher interaction. I'll say that's nonsense. Then there's some places out there on the complete opposite end. We don't need any technology at all. We don't need it. And that's nonsense too, and the research shows that. Where is it? It's that right blend. Here's the difficulty if I'm a teacher. What's right for one child is going to be right or could be different for another child. So how do I personalize? How do I differentiate? I've been saying to differentiate for kids for years. But what often happens? Here's my high group, here's my middle group, here's my low group. We called it personalized, differentiating. Well, now the buzzword is personalized learning. The only way you can hit kids where they are, and there's 30 of them in a class, is through using technology. But we need to make sure we're focusing on lessons that are higher order thinking, not just using technology for technology's sake in that regard. I do love this video here, or sorry, this quote here, and it talks about how a 2-year-old, this was my little girl Paisley, and at 2 years old, she could unlock a tablet and put in her code and fly through apps and turn on the music and then go over here and read a story and design and do all that stuff. But yet sometimes we as teachers feel like a little nervous about that, and that's okay, and I'm not demeaning that at all. How do we support people that are feeling that way so that they can truly empower them in the classroom? So let me show you where she was at 2.5. We downloaded a bunch of a bunch of apps for her, and I promised at never at any point was I going to force her to do something with technology. I wanted her to just explore it and have fun with it. Watching my 5-year-old little girl teach my 65-year-old mom about Wi-Fi was priceless, by the way. And taking a look here. Here she is at 2.5 years old.
What shape is that?
That's a star.
That's a star. And back to the first one.
And that's a triangle.
Triangle. And what is that?
And that's rectangle. And that's a square.
Square.
That's a diamond.
That's a diamond.
That's a heart.
That's a heart.
And that's a hexagon.
That's a hexagon.
And oval.
Oh.
And you might say, well, Tom, that's simple regurgitation. She was just using the iPad to get those specific things. And I'd say, yeah, you're right. She was 2. I'll take it. And at 2, there she was having that recognition. How many 2-year-olds were able to say rhombus and those types of things, or trapezoid? Now, I'm not going to say she's some brilliant kid. She's a student or a kid with access, opportunity. Take a look here. Let's take a look at my little boy at 2 years old. Some kids need more time. They are different kids. He is nowhere near where she was at 2 in that regard. So here she is at 3.
Okay, class. Take a picture.
At 3 years old, talking to the cloud and taking pictures to the cloud at 3, thinking through that. So the other day we were driving back, living on the East Coast towards the Jersey Shore about a month ago or so. And I hear, hey, Daddy, can you download the Minecraft app for me? And I'm like, come again? Like, where do you know about that? And she's like, Daddy, all my friends are using it. And I'm like, oh, who are all your friends? You're 5. Within 24 hours, and by the way, I never offered her any professional learning on it. Within 24 hours, this is the conversation we were having.
Paisley, what game are you playing?
Minecraft.
What do you do in Minecraft?
Design stuff.
You get to design stuff? Can you show me what you're working on?
What you'll see is she's creating a 3D rendering of a farm using
So what did
different
you
shapes
design?
and objects and those types of things. So guess what
made a
happened as a dad after that? We're walking through Target and she sees Minecraft Legos. So we start to say, hey, if I can design this on a computer, I can use these manipulatives to create it. And she's creating these structures and these images. Yes, I limit screen time and those types of things, but she's creating these and talking math. And so we're using all sorts of math to explore, to create, to design. And she's 5. She's not some brilliant kid. Of course, I think she is because she's dad. She's just like every other kid, but she has opportunity and she has access. Schools across America are using this type of tool digitally to help get kids there. You know the kids in your school that will come to school for an opportunity to use something like Minecraft to create digitally. Years ago, we may have been doing it a little bit differently, but think of the math that goes into what you're looking at there. Think of the architecture behind that design that you see. But what often happens in schools when we talk about these digital tools is we put all this stuff out there, and when are we teaching kids how to use things properly? So for instance, when we talk about, we would never give a 16-year-old a car without training them or without helping them understand this is a seatbelt, this is why you need to use it. But very often we give them the Chromebook without any sort of lesson like that. So when we talk about things like digital citizenship or those types of things, if I were to take just, for instance, the Jersey Shore, of course I'm on the East Coast, so I'd use an example from out there, you'd get things like that. And people traditionally think, the Jersey Shore, that's what you often think. But you'd get that. That's this tiny little town in Pennsylvania. And I live in Pennsylvania, I didn't know it existed. And you get things like that. Some of you are like, yep, love that show. Sorry it went off the air, right? But that's still Jersey Shore. You get things like that. There was an ed camp there. Where are we teaching kids the same skills that we also taught them 20 years ago to think critically about what resources and references make sense, what's what we're looking for, and what is not? Depending on what you're looking for, those are very different ways to search, and you're going to get very different pieces of information. So another one of our gears, I talked about curriculum instruction and assessment, is professional learning. The one-size-fits-all, top-down, hours-based approach to professional learning, which so many schools around our nation still uses, shows little to no impact on student achievement. Why do we do it? Because hours are easy to total and they're easy to put in a contract. But yet it shows almost no impact. We've all been there where we've attended the workshop on Thursday from 4 to 6 because your daughter doesn't have soccer and that's the one that works for your family, so that's the one you're going to go to, so that's what you do so you can sign off. When I was a teacher, or when I was a principal in elementary school, it was my second year being there, and I had a great teacher in February come to me and she said, Tom, here's my sheet, here's my 18 hours. I'm done with my professional development for this year. And I'm like, yeah, that's awesome, great job, you're on the ball, that's great. And I drove home being like, man, what have we set up? The mindset of I've finished learning as a teacher. What would we want for our own children's teacher in terms of their mindset? This short video, reminds me a lot about professional learning across our nation.
Whoa, that's not good.
Oh, I don't need this. I'm already late.
Somebody will come. Anybody out there?
Do you have a phone?
No. Sorry. Somebody! Hello? There are 2 people stuck on an escalator and we need help. Now, would somebody please do something? I don't believe this. You gotta be kidding me.
I'm gonna cry.
Well, there's not enough left to do.
Because so many times, and you're thinking, how's that professional learning? The answer is right in front of them. We've been telling teachers to differentiate and to meet kids where they are for as long as I can remember. And then quite often, how do we structure our professional learning? The opposite. One size fits all, sit and get, let me talk at you for an hour. So when we take a look at professional learning and what works, look at the right-hand side. If you take a look, personalized professional learning. If it's good for kids, it's good for adults. So how are we personalizing the PD for our staff? Where's that shared ownership? Take a look at, for instance, the Ed Camp model, one of the partners for Future Ready. Why has the Ed Camp model gone through the roof and people showing up on Saturdays without any pay? Teacher voice, teacher choice. Where does teacher voice and choice fit in your district? Because if it doesn't, put a survey out. Think about it. And this is what we did as school administrators. Put an anonymous survey out. And as leaders, have teachers rate you in terms of professional learning, the opportunities they have. Make it anonymous. See what you get back. Why not? Right? Where is the voice from teachers? Where's the choice? We treat them like professionals. We trust them with the lives of children every day. But sometimes we don't give them a voice in their own professional learning. Because if we're measuring seat time, we're truly just measuring the wrong end of the learner when we think through that. We all know. For our administrators in the room, the way you run faculty meetings, the way you run in-service days should be a direct reflection of the type of instruction you're looking for in the classroom. How can it not be? Right? So how are we structuring those types of days? District out here, some other things that are going on that are starting to shift as we start to change this stuff nationwide. Districts going to things like micro-credentials and those types of environments that are very different. Why do we treat the 30-year veteran teacher, the master teacher, who's truly doing an incredible, incredible job, the same exact way in professional learning quite often that we teach the first teacher that's doing their first day? Think about that. We would never do that to kids. Why do we do that to teachers? So teachers, where's your voice? Where's your choice? And how do you take ownership of that? Because future-ready professional learning is personalized. Now, what I'll challenge you teachers, if you're sitting back saying, yep, I knew it, my admin's all wrong, I knew it, I told you they're doing a bad, bad job. It's not their job for you to grow professionally. It's your job for you to grow professionally. Using that doctor or that dentist analogy, would I want to go to a doctor whose mindset is to say, sorry, my practice didn't offer any high-quality professional learning this year, so I didn't learn anything? No! We want that doctor to have it in them to say, I'm going to do this better for my patients. We need our teachers to be saying, I'm going to do this better tomorrow than I did yesterday because I love and care about my kids so much, I'll do whatever it takes for them. A lot of that's cultural, and how do we get to that type of mindset? So some quick examples. Things like Twitter. How are you able to connect with people all across the country? How is it that I can fly from the East Coast here, get off the plane and walk here and know people for the first time, and know them, though, through things like Twitter and have relationships with people around your nation? Not saying it should replace your face-to-face, but how are you growing? How are those outside ideas infusing your campus and your workplace? For instance, there's 300 Twitter chats that go on a weekly basis. bit.ly/educhat calendar will show those. Regardless of what you teach, whether you're a kindergarten teacher or there's kinder chat, those types of things, you can plug into people just like you all around the nation talking about opportunities that you're looking for. Are you taking advantage of that? A tool like Voxer allows you to create in your own time. Anytime, anywhere learning shouldn't just be for kids. It's for us as well. It's a great tool to be able to grow professionally. Podcasts. Many times I'll hear people say, I don't have time, Tom. I don't have time. Do you drive to work? You have 10 minutes in the car? Ooh, yeah, you do, don't you? What about listening to a podcast that might challenge your thinking? So many of those out there. Other ideas, other things. I laugh at the Pinterest example. I mean, a number of months ago, people were saying, you can get on Pinterest. I'm like, I'm not getting on Pinterest. My wife's on Pinterest. I don't want to be on Pinterest. Pinterest is for girls. I had that thick head of a man, right? And I get on Pinterest. What do I see? Amazing education resources that could support people. What a great way to grow professionally. What a great way to challenge our own thinking. Side note, I wrote a book on the topic. All right, let's talk about budget and resources. Many of you, many times as teachers, we think we don't have an impact on this. I'll say you absolutely have an impact on this. Can't tell you the number of times I walk into a classroom and they got the Chromebook on the left and the huge packet of paper on the right. Man, the way we copy between copier paper and toner and printer leases, millions of dollars for most districts on that stuff. Quite often when I consult with districts, one of the things they'll say is, I want you to pull your budget for those 3 things over the past 3 years and pull your technology budget. What happens quite often? They both go up. If we're making more copies and going one-to-one, there is a problem. That is a sign that our one-to-one and those types of things is probably not as effective as we think it is. So how as we teachers can do that? If we can do it digitally, we can save our district money to help support us in that regard. The sustainability piece is here. When we take a look and we think about districts that are buying iPads and other devices on 30-year bonds, that's negligence, in my opinion. So how are we making sure that our digital transformation is sustainable? Because a lot of time when we're talking about this digital stuff, it's I buy everything I ever bought, and then I'm just going to layer the digital on top of it. Oh, budget cuts, guess the computers have to go this year. At what point does it just become a way that teaching and learning happens? Let's talk about technology, the networks, the infrastructure side of things, because this is really important. The problem is, this is digital learning for most districts. When they think about digital learning, they instantly think laptops and infrastructure. Yes, that is vital. Yes, it doesn't work without it, but that cannot be the sole driver. When we think about the key pieces to this, what's the refresh plan? Can't tell you how many teachers around the nation will say, Tom, I really want to do this stuff, but my cart of laptops is from 1992. I can't stream a video. The lock it and block it mentality for many of our tech directors, and I say that as a former tech director, is getting in the way of many of our kids learning. Many times we don't see that from that side. So how are we from an infrastructure side moving things forward in that regard? Here's what I want you to do. I want you to take out your device and I want you to hold it up high. And I want you to think about, if you're like me, you probably got the 6S or whatever the case may be, the morning it came out. Do you realize that the technology that we have in our schools today and the technology you're holding is the worst technology that our children will see moving forward? Think about that. At one point in time, my daughter will look at me and be like, Dad, did you really use the iPhone 6? How did you live on that thing? We think back through history. That's what we always do. We look back even just a few years. So when we're thinking about all of this technology, and we're thinking about all this stuff, it cannot be the main driver. Even here in Silicon Valley, not too far from here, if that is our focus as educators, we're always going to be trying to play getting caught up. I no lie heard somebody say, I need to get the iPad 3s that just came out because the iPad 2s aren't cutting it in my classroom. If that's the mindset we have, we're going to spend a lot of money and not get any return for it from student achievement level. I think this video will help show that.
A new tourist destination in Auburn Hills, Michigan is showing visitors the difficulties life held for Americans in the past. Blockbuster Video aims to transport visitors to a time before the internet. It's an historically authentic recreation of a video store, a specialty shop where customers exchanged money for the short-term use of videos in an archaic system called renting.
The tour is amazing. It's like stepping into a time machine. It's hard to believe that people live this way.
A historical research team spent 3 years making sure every last detail was accurate, from the signs used to promote the store's merchandise to the costumes worn by the store's employees, historical performers who make history come alive for tour groups twice an hour.
My character is based on an actual Blockbuster employee named Jerome, who worked there from May of 1999 to June 2000. My main responsibilities are to man the cash register and to put the movies from the return slot back onto the shelves.
I am a Blockbuster customer named Kathy. 2 times a week, I travel 6 miles to rent and return videos. Oh, look, we're in the comedy section. What's so poignant about this time is the uncertainty. When you get to the Blockbuster, are they going to have your video? Did someone else rent it? Is there going to be a line? Are the alarms going to sound when you walk out the front door? It was very difficult for the people that lived during this era.
Actors say their job is to create a historically authentic experience.
Yes, we have it, but our only copy is currently checked out.
After the organized tour, visitors are allowed to move around the store, exploring the so-called living museum.
It's really amazing that people had to go through so much just to get a movie.
Blockbuster joins a growing number of historical tourism sites, including Buffalo, New York's recreation of Virgin Records Music Store and Iowa City's Borders Bookstore Museum.
And it's funny because we all lived in that world not too long ago. But we have many classrooms in our nation that are just like Blockbuster Video. How do we change that? How do we transform that? You see, because if our goal in our classroom is to simply put technology in our classroom, I've heard that out of the mouths of superintendents. And what we're going to get is technology in the classroom. And we will have these amazing 21st century learning tools in 20th century learning environments not doing much good. Michael Fullen says that pedagogy is the driver. Technology is an incredible accelerator. Are we teaching like that? Point being with the technology side of things is that we always, always, always have to lead with learning, not with technology. I failed at that many times as a teacher. Many times I created lessons. When I was one-to-one Palm Pilots 14 years ago, I created lessons just because the devices could beam back and forth with no learning outcomes in the mix. So focusing on that technology is vital. Let's talk about community partnerships. How are you partnering with your businesses, your community, who's telling your district story? When you take a look at the things on the right, you can see some of the key areas there. Your district brand, local community engagement, a global awareness. How are you doing that in your district? You see, quite often there's a huge distrust for what we do. Our schools need to have completely glass walls where the community can constantly see in. One of the examples I always use, and not just because he's sitting in this room, is one of my best friends, Joe Sanfilippo, from Fall Creek, Wisconsin, this tiny little 800-kid district. I know what's going on in Fall Creek, Wisconsin virtually every day because his teachers and his administrators are sharing out the great things. There's amazing things happening in every one of your classrooms every day. How does your community know about it? If I can know it 1,000 miles away from Wisconsin, your local community can know as well. How do you share the great things going on in your classroom every single day, or in your building, or in your district? And what's going on with that? Let me show you a couple other things that districts are doing. This is Spartanburg 7 down in South Carolina. Do you realize that many of your children, when they leave your school door, they walk out and they completely lose access? Number one, do you know who those kids are? Number two, what are you doing about it? Well, this district, Spartanburg 7, they created a Wi-Fi map. You go to that website, you'll see on the map, here are all the locations that our students can go, partnering with businesses, after school to get access. It's being coined the homework gap. It's the next push from the FCC. When you take a look, when 40% of our nation's kids leave our schools and lose that broadband access, yet 70% of our nation's teachers are asking them to do something digital outside of school, there's a discrepancy there that's a problem. So how do we support kids that don't have that access? How can we partner with businesses? In this district, it's a very large district in South Carolina, they're partnering with all of that, and you go to their district website and you go to that map, and you will see on that map there all of the places kids can go to get free access after school. Guess what happens? Their businesses are really now involved in their district, and that's a really good thing. How are businesses involved in your district and your community? This is Forsyth County Schools in Georgia. They do the same type of thing. That's the sticker they put in the window showing kids in town, if you need a place to work, you need to come get connected, you can come here and we'll provide a safe place for you. What a great way to partner with our community. Do you realize there's Wi-Fi on Mount Everest? There is. It's not a joke. There is. That's the map. And when you take a look at that, one of the things our president often says, I love it, in a country where we expect free Wi-Fi with our coffee, how in the world can we not have it in our classrooms? Yet many of our schools are still unconnected. We heard that in the keynote this morning as well. And so when we think through that, we think about that, how are we partnering with our community to help all of our kids? How are we supporting those students in our schools that don't have much when they leave us? Talk about this brand, this concept of branding, and Joe Sanfilippo will have an amazing session this weekend on it. When you take a look at that, branding is typically a marketing term. It's becoming more of an educational term. Who is telling your district story? Who's doing it? Quite often, when we take a look at the newspaper, education stories aren't so positive. There's probably more negative stories out there than positive stories. but yet a lot more positives are going on every single day. So who's telling that? So places are using things like Twitter, things like Instagram, things like Facebook to make sure that our information is getting out there. When I was an elementary principal 6 years ago and Facebook was relatively new for some of that stuff, I brought up to my superintendent, hey, I would like to start a Facebook page for the district. We had those conversations thinking, well, what if somebody writes a negative comment? The first 5 parents that liked our elementary school elementary school Facebook page were 5 parents, I'm sorry to say this, but 5 parents that I didn't think checked a darn thing. But guess what? It was showing up now in their Facebook feed, and we knew they were on Facebook all day long. So how are we using those types of things? Because somebody is absolutely telling our school story every day. Is it you? Is it your colleagues? Is it your principal? Let's talk about this concept of data and privacy as well. I had the opportunity to testify in front of Congress a little over a year ago on the privacy issue. I know California last year kind of led the way as a state on the privacy piece. So many times when I'm talking in different states, I'll say, if you're not thinking about privacy, you will. And I know in California, it's already on it's already on the horizon here. When we think about the data and privacy sides of things, just talk data first for a minute. Quite often what we're doing in our nation's schools is we're collecting huge amounts of data. Quite often we're looking at it and saying, okay, I knew that. And then I just keep teaching the way I was doing it. Man, what a waste that is. How about data literacy? Who in your schools are helping teachers truly understand if this is the data that we have, how do we utilize it? When we talk about personalized learning and what we can do with technology, we can now use that data to create unique learning paths to meet students exactly where they are. You can't do that without technology. But how are we training our teachers to understand that and do that? Because most college prep programs are not doing that for them. Talking about this issue of privacy and thinking a little bit more of it, just if you look at this map here, there's currently 127 privacy-related bills in 37 states. And if you take a look, there's also about 28 new laws related to student privacy this year. FERPA was written in an era when all the student information was in a filing cabinet. Nobody cared if the office was open after school. It was just sitting in a filing cabinet. Now that we put it online, people have all these privacy concerns, and for good reason. Connect EDU was a data company, an early intervention company. When they went bankrupt, they turned around and they sold all of the student data. And districts are like, oh, how can you do that? Well, guess what? All of their contracts said they could, and every district signed off on it. So privacy has really come to the forefront and making sure we're thinking about that. I want to do a 1-minute activity with you here to heighten your own alert on privacy. Pull your phone out again for a moment. If you've got an iOS device, I want you to go through the steps on the left. If you've got an Android device, I want you to go through the steps on the right. So with an iOS device, click on Settings, click on Privacy, click on Location Services, System Services, Frequent Locations, and History. By default, what you're about to see is on. If you do it in Android, it then links you right to a Google map. And what you'll notice as you go through those steps and take a look is what I saw my first time looked like this. You see that right there, that's my house. That right there, that's the times that I was at my house. Do you realize your phone tracks all of your locations? This is not a new thing. This has been like that for years. Now I know what you'll do for the next 2 minutes. You're all going to be stuck on your phone trying to shut it off. Yes, you can shut it off. But think of the privacy implications here. My children, I probably have 500 pictures of my children, my wife, and my family on my phone. If I were to leave my phone unlocked at some sort of sports place, let's say a restaurant, and I would be drinking a soda, and I would be leaving my phone right there, unlocked. I could pull up pictures of my children and go there and instantly see in under a minute, here's pictures of my kids, and here's where I live. Privacy concern? You better believe it. So we think about how in the world can we make sure that teachers have access to all the great things they need and they deserve. They got the hardest job in the world. But then at the same time, keep the precious lives of our 5- and 6-year-olds and our 17-year-olds. I know they're not so precious at times, but they're very valuable. Love them too. And we keep their privacy at the forefront. Looking at it as a parent will help you looking at it a little bit different as well. So as parents ask you, well, you're collecting all this data on my kid, how is it going to be safe? What do you say to that? Do you have a good response to that? We need to. Let's talk next about the next gear, that's use of time and space. We covered space a little bit. Do we realize that we're teaching the Netflix generation? My daughter at 5 years old will have no concept, she has no concept of what it's like to have to wait till next Tuesday at 7 o'clock to watch her TV show. She doesn't know. She pulls out her iPad and she gets content instantly. And then when she goes to school, sometimes, fortunately, she's in a great school with a great teacher, by the way, which is phenomenal. But with that said, sometimes many of our kids across our nation go into school, and if I want the content, we're going to cover that next Tuesday. We'll see you next Tuesday. How outdated is that? In a world where a kid can then just pull up the device, go on YouTube, and learn it anyway. So how do we create anytime, anywhere learning? Not just for kids, but for our teachers as well with this Netflix generation. If you take a look at some of the key things on the right-hand side, learning is flexible. Anytime, anywhere learning, that new pedagogy or competency-based, places looking at that type of model as well. And how are we doing that to shift our learning moving forward? You see, that's a school bus in Coachella Valley, south of here. A good friend of mine, Daryl Adams, is a superintendent there. And so he started putting Wi-Fi on his school buses, and I know that many schools are starting to do that. But you know what Daryl did 2 years ago? Is on a Saturday, he noticed that many of his kids were coming and parking right outside his district office. And they were hopping on their Wi-Fi. And he said, man, we've got all these buses. The buses have Wi-Fi, and they're parked overnight in a garage where nobody can use them. So he took his buses and he parked them in the poorest area of his community overnight so that the kids could go closer to home and hop on Wi-Fi. Talk about anytime, anywhere learning. When the batteries started dying in only a few hours, he put solar panels on them. He was near that Palm Springs area. We know they've got a lot of sun down there. So now his kids have some of that additional access, that use of time. Not just is their hour ride home now ability to have Wi-Fi on their device and their hour ride there. And guess what happens to discipline, by the way? It goes way down. They gain that time to be connected during the school day to work on things, and now overnight supporting that as well. Kudos to Daryl to thinking through, how do I support kids a little bit differently? Well, this is in Kent School District in Washington. They're also taking a look and saying, how do we get that anytime, anywhere learning, especially with kids without access? And they're taking these kiosks and they're placing them in laundromats, in churches, in synagogues, and those types of places so people can go. And they can go and they can do that. And guess what? If I'm mom or I'm dad, I can hop on that computer and also apply for a job and look for places that I can better myself in terms of training. What a great way to help reach the community. So we've talked about all of these different things. But I will tell you that I've been in schools that have it all when it comes to the stuff. They've got great infrastructure. They've got great devices. But the culture is toxic. The leaders are ruling by fear and not by empowerment. People aren't willing to take those risks. Leadership and culture will dictate the success of so much of this. Because I've also been in places that don't have a whole lot. Rural Arkansas, 100 miles from the closest Walmart, has a principal there at the high school level saying, I will do whatever it takes. We might not have a whole lot of connectivity, but I'm going to empower our teachers. I will empower and create that culture of innovation. They're doing amazing digital things. We highlighted St. Paul, that high school there in Arkansas, and Daisy Dyer. We highlighted them on our digital learning day, but yet they're so remote with limited connectivity in that regard. Why? Because of the culture of innovation, the leadership that empowered all of this. Toxic environments, this will not work. You see, where the magic happens and our comfort zone are often in two totally different places. When we run buildings, sometimes we want to micromanage because we need it done all right. But if we're trying to do it all ourselves, and I say this as a principal that failed at that many times, trying to do it all myself and not empowering the incredible teachers and educators that we have, it will not be as successful as it could be. So how are we pushing ourselves past our comfort zones and challenging us to do that? This video, I think, is a great example of risk-taking. And sometimes when we take risks, we fall flat on our face. As building leaders, how are you creating a culture of innovation? How are you doing that for your students if you're a teacher? You see, this isn't just an administrator's job, everything I've talked about in the past few minutes, because everything they are supposed to be doing for you need to be doing for kids. So when that kid in your classroom totally screws up, how do you handle it? If that was you, how would you want your principal to handle it? How are you creating that culture of risk-taking, that culture where it's okay to make a mistake, give it your all, create something, design something, and if it totally fails, you learned a way not to do it? How are you creating that in your classrooms and in your schools for the kids that we serve? Because culture will eat initiative for lunch every day of the week. Because if we have this great initiative that's really well planned, but we have a completely toxic culture where people are going to undermine things, it will fall apart, and it will come back to haunt us. So when we look at this Future Ready framework and we think about all the work that's being done with the 2,000 school districts that have signed on to the Future Ready Pledge, we take a look at all of the different aspects of the framework. We've also provided, back to an informational piece here, totally free for schools. What's great, everything that we share is totally free. There's no catch. How often do you hear that, right? And so when you take a look at the Future Ready dashboard, where your districts can go, it's dashboard.futurereadyschools.org. We've got this incredible tool where you have these high-level assessments that you get teams together that will give you scores for readiness and those types of things to help plan. Because quite often when we do that comprehensive planning or strategic planning, I've been in more administrative meetings in my life than I ever want to be a part of in that stuff. We're sitting around in a room and we all kind of think, all right, what do we want to do in 5 years? How do we want to get there? And the two loudest people in the room get their way, and that's 5 years. That's your strategic plan for a district. What are you basing it on? What's the data? Is it the person that showed up that night or didn't show up that night that helped your strategic plan, and that's why it went that one direction? So we've created this tool that gives digital readiness scores in all of the different areas that I've shown you. This tool is based on years of research and years of data in that regard. Again, totally free from a privacy, and districts totally own all of their data. It gives them scores, but not only does it give them scores, it gives them a complete gap analysis of here's where you as a district rated. Here's the gaps that are seen based on best practice, based on research. There it is. And then here's strategies to help you close those gaps. Those strategies are written by 40 practitioners from around the nation, superintendents and tech directors that have had a lot of success in this area. Totally free tool to be able to help assess that. You can then take each assessment with another team, or you could send it out to 400 teachers, get their feedback, roll it into one report, and get a gap analysis and strategies and those types in our gear level assessment. We need to be seeing what our community thinks and what our teachers think. Their voices absolutely matter. And our kids, they're the ones that we're there to serve. This free tool through Future Ready is absolutely there to support your district. There's hundreds of free resources. I shared earlier the coalition, all our coalition partners, all 40 of them, have compiled all of their free resources for districts. And we've got it in this one-stop shop, totally free for districts. Hundreds of free resources, totally aligned to the framework that I just shared. Free, no catch. Also with Future Ready, we have ongoing professional learning, because I'll be the first to tell you, signing a pledge and going to a summit for 2 days will not transform your district. We all know that. But it starts a conversation about how we need to transform as a district moving forward. So we're working to provide free online professional learning opportunities from webinars and MOOCs and those types of things to be able to support our schools moving forward. And for me and you, this is personal. You see that? Those are my babies. Caden's 2, complete knucklehead. My little princess, she's 5. And you see, just a few weeks ago, for the very first time, she went to kindergarten. I can open up a school as a principal, no problem, don't think much of it. I put my baby on a bus and I'm crying my eyes out. And she walked into a classroom just like yours, or a building just like yours, a few weeks ago. We need to teach, and we need to plan, and we need to think, because I realize that every student in every class is somebody else's little Paisley. And we need to teach to it, like realizing that every child in our classroom and every child in our schools is somebody else's entire world. Are we teaching like that? Are we planning our schools like that? I know a lot of places that absolutely do. The heart of all of this transformation truly comes down to one thing, and that's relationships. What's your relationships like with the children that you serve? What are the relationships like with the teachers you serve, superintendents, principals? Because the heart of transformation, the heart of all of this, with our community, with our kids, with our businesses, comes down to relationships. If we don't have good relationships, this transformation is not going to go very well. So how are you fostering that in your classroom or in your school? I want to give a shout out to CCSD 59 outside of Chicago, a school district that created this video last November for when we introduced the president to kick this all off. Take a look.
I ready? Are you?
Thank you for serving the kids of our nation. Thank you for what you do every day, all day, to love and care about kids. Thanks for listening.